Good morning and welcome to Lynk Breakfast News right here at Radio Lynk 97.5 FM. I am Boatin Dorothy and I'll be doing this with
Yasewa.
The headlines. Sahel extremist groups pushing south towards Ghana. CDS warns of growing security threat.
Gamanche calls for collective action, stricter enforcement to address reoccurring floods in Accra.
Floods require collective responsibility to address NLA balls.
UWR, police arrest 3 suspects for possession of 50,000 rounds of ammunition.
Esiedun Ketia calls for overhaul of global economic order, says Africa's sovereignty remains incomplete.
NCCE dismisses reports of 14 million Ghana cedis budget freeze, insists civic education activities continue.
World Bank says Finance Ministry fiscal control delays great projects.
Inflation for June 2026 rises sharply to 5.3%, rising non-food prices main contributor. 3
die in Mexico City World Cup celebration.
1 Ghanaian shot dead during mass xenophobic protest in South Africa.
Now the news. The Chief of Defense Staff, Lieutenant General Williams Ejapon, has warned that violent extremist groups operating in the Sahel region have already extended their influence into northern parts of West Africa and are now probing further south towards Ghana, raising fresh security concerns for the country's northern frontier. Speaking on behalf of the Deputy Finance Minister, Ernest Borga Gemfi, at the 50th anniversary Republic Day celebration lecture held at the Ghana Armed Forces Command and Staff College in Teshi, Lieutenant General Ejapon said the regional security environment has changed dramatically and now demands urgent and coordinated responses from both Ghana and its partners. He said extremist organizations in the Sahel are no longer static but have become adaptive, well-resourced and patient in their expansion, warning that their activities have already affected neighboring countries. Lieutenant General Ejapon also raised alarm over growing maritime insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea, saying criminal networks operating at sea are increasingly linked to border transnational organized crime systems that overlap with feminist financing and logistics. He noted that Ghana has witnessed several incidents of robbery at sea, including attacks on fishermen in which outboard motors are stolen and victims left stranded, describing the situation as a serious threat to the country's blue economy and coastal livelihoods. Ghana, he stressed, is geographically positioned between 2 converging security threats: violent extremism from the Sahel to the north and maritime crime in the Gulf to the south, a reality he said must be treated as a planning priority rather than an alarmist claim. The CDS disclosed that the government is undertaking significant retooling of the Ghana Armed Forces as part of broader efforts to strengthen border security, maritime surveillance, and overall operational readiness.
In other news, the Gamanche King Takite Kotro II and the Ga Traditional Council have called for a united national effort to address Accra's reoccurring flood, stressing that the perennial problem requires more than engineering solution and must be tackled through collective responsibility, strict enforcement of planning, regulation, and improved environmental stewardship. In a statement issued on Wednesday, July 1st, the Ga Traditional Council expressed concern over the persistent flooding that continues to threaten lives, livelihood, and property across Accra, while commending ongoing government efforts to respond to the crisis. The council acknowledged the intervention being undertaken by the government. The Greater Accra Regional Minister, Linda Obenewa Akwele Oklo, the National Disaster Management Organization, NADMO, Metropolitan Authorities, and the Security Services to mediate the impacts of the recent flood. The government chair extended heartfelt condolences to families and communities affected by the heavy rains, particularly traders, motorists, and residents whose homes and businesses were inundated. The remark come after torrential rainfall caused widespread flooding across parts of Greater Accra region, resulting in extensive damage to homes, businesses, public infrastructure, while emergency agencies mounted rescue and relief operations in several affected communities. While recognizing the importance of drainage infrastructure and engineering solutions, the Ghana Traditional Council argued that Accra's flooding crisis is fundamentally a shared responsibility requiring behavioral change and stronger compliance with environmental and planning regulations.
Still in the news of flooding, Director General NLA Mohammed Abdul Salam has said that the flood disaster demands collective responsibility from sound policy direction and effective implementation to active citizenship rooted in patriotism, discipline, and care of our environment. He says sustainable solutions will require all to play their part. He was reacting to the devastating floods that occurred in parts of Accra earlier this week. He commended the swift response by President John Dramani Mahama in directing the Ministry of Finance to release funds to support victims. As we mark 66 years of Ghana's journey as a sovereign republic, this day calls not only for celebration, but for deep reflection on the kind of nation we are building together. It should not only be numbers we count each year, but true reflection of our growth and advancement as a nation. While we honor our progress, we must also confront the present challenges before us. The recurring floods in parts of the Greater Accra region remain a matter of serious concern. Year after year, lives are disrupted, properties are lost, and livelihoods are threatened. We cannot afford to grow accustomed to this reality. This moment demands collective responsibility, from sound policy direction and effective implementation to active citizenship rooted in patriotism, discipline, and care for our environment. Sustainable solutions will require all of us to play our part. My thoughts and prayers are with the families and businesses affected by these unfortunate events. May strength and support find you in this difficult time.
Moving on in other news, the Upper West Regional Police Command has intercepted a large consignment of ammunition being transported through an unapproved route outside Wa, leading to the arrest of 3 suspects, according to a statement issued on Wednesday, July 1st, 2026, and signed by the Deputy Upper West Regional Police Commander, ACP Peter Kamasa. The operation was carried out on Monday, June 29th, 2026, when police officers intercepted a commercial vehicle suspected of transporting illegal ammunition. As such, of the vehicle uncovered 200 boxes of AA cartridges amounting to 50,000 rounds of ammunition, which had been concealed beneath other goods. The police identified the 3 suspects as Al Hassan Ishaku, Idrisu Mahood, and Al Haji Isaku. They are currently in police custody, assisting with investigation into the case. The regional Police Command said investigations are ongoing to establish the source of the ammunition and to identify and apprehend any other individual connected to the transportation. The command commended the professionalism and integrity of the officers who carried out the operation, describing their actions as instrumental in preventing the illegal movement of the ammunition. In further assured residents of region of its unwavering commitment to protecting lives and property, preventing crime, and maintaining peace and security across the region. ACP Kamasa appealed to the public to continue supporting law enforcement by providing timely and credible information that will aid in combating crime and safeguarding communities.
Moving on, the National Chairman of the National Democratic Congress, NDC, Johnson Asiedu Nketia, has called for a fundamental restructuring of the global economic order, arguing that political independence alone is insufficient if nations remain constrained by external forces. Addressing the third meeting of the Standing Committee of the International Movement for Freedom of Nations in St. Petersburg, Russia, Mr. Esiedun Ketia said Africa's quest for the true sovereignty remains unfinished because many developing countries continue to operate within economic systems they neither design nor control. Drawing on the philosophy of Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he said political liberation must be accompanied by economic independence. According to him, while many African countries gained political sovereignty decades ago, they continue to face economic constraints imposed by global financial systems, trade regimes, technology ownership and structures, and international institutions. Mr. Esiedun Ketia argued that although former colonial rule has ended, new forms of influence continue to shape the fortunes of developing nations.
Moving on, the National Commission for Civic Education (NCCE) has dismissed reports suggesting that non-release of its 2026 budget allocation has pushed the institution into a funding crisis, describing such claims as misleading and lacking official verification. In a press statement issued on Wednesday, the Commission responded to an online publication headline on disbursed 14.6 million Ghana cedis budget pushes NCCE into funding crisis, which claimed that although Parliament had approved Ghana 14.58479 for commission in the 2026 budget, no funds had been released to support its operations and civic education programs nationwide. According to the NCCE, the publication created a false impression that the Commission had ceased operations and abandoned its constitutional mandate. This claim is misleading, contrary to the impression created by the publication. The NCCE has not ceased operation, nor has it abandoned its constitutional mandate. Civic education activities continues across the country, although the Commission has continued to operate within the significant financial constraints that have historically affected its work, and statements said. The Commission further rejected assertion that it had received no funding, insisting that such claims lack basis. The Commission said these collaborations should not be misconstrued as evidence of institutional collapse or improper dependence.
Moving on to some business news. The World Bank has blamed fiscal controls introduced by the Ministry of Finance for significantly delaying implementations of the Greater Accra Resilience and Integrated Development GREAT project, one of the country's flagship programs aimed at trafficking chronic flooding in the capital. In its latest implementation update released in May 2026, the bank downgraded the project's implementation performance to moderately unsatisfactory, citing persistent funding constraints despite the project remaining fully financed. The implementation of GREAT has been significantly constrained by fiscal measures introduced by the Ministry of Finance during 2025, the report said. The findings have taken on added significance following the devastating floods of June 29th, which killed at least 12 people and renewed attention on Accra's long-standing drainage and flood management challenges. The $350 million GREAT project supports Ghana's efforts to strengthen flood risk management, improve solid waste management, and enhance urban resilience across selected metropolitan and municipal assemblies within the Greater Accra metropolitan area. The program covers 5 major components, including drainage and flood risk infrastructure, solid waste management, urban upgrading, institutional coordination, project management, and emergency response. According to the World Bank, progress on the ground has lagged well behind planning. Even so, the bank said progress towards the project's overall development objectives remained broadly aligned with expectations. It's noted that the flood early warning system is fully operational and that solid waste collection from undeserved communities has exceeded annual targets. Although delays persist across several major civil works. However, no public flooding warning was issued ahead of the June 29 floods, prompting questions about the role the operational early warning system played in the disaster. The bank attributes much of the slowdown to financing restrictions imposed during 2025. According to the report, the Ministry of Finance introduced a ceiling on project disbursement and temporarily swept 13.8 million Ghana cedis from the project's designated account. These measures created severe cash flow constraints, resulting in unpaid interim payment certificates (IPCs), delayed payments to contractors, and slower execution of civil works. As of April 14, 2026, only $137 million, representing about 40% of the project's total $350 million financing, has been disbursed. The bank notes that the project recorded virtually no disbursements for approximately 16 months, from November 2024 to March 2026, because of government's fiscal controls affecting access to project funds.
In another story, Ghana's year-on-year inflation rate rose to 5.3% in June 2026, up from 3.7% in May, marking a 1.6 percentage point increase, largely driven by rising non-food prices. According to the Ghana Statistical Service (GSS), despite the increase, inflation remains significantly lower than the 13.7% recorded in June 2025. Indicating that the price pressures are still easing compared to the same period last year. Data released by the GSS showed that the consumer price index (CPI) increased to 270.8 in June from 257.3 in the corresponding period last year. On a month-on-month basis, inflation slowed to 0.2%, down from 1.1% in May, suggesting that while prices continue to rise, the pace of increase moderated. Non-food inflation remained the main driver of overall price increases, climbing to 6.3% from 4.1% in May and accounting for 68.5% of total inflation.
Moving on to the world of sports. A 19-year-old woman is among 3 people who have died from suffocating during World Cup celebrations in Mexico City on Tuesday. A 48-year-old woman and a 44-year-old man also died after crowds descended on the city following the country's 2-1 victory over Ecuador, the capital's health authority said on Wednesday. More than 1 million people took the streets, mainly around the Angel of Independence monument in downtown, to mark the country's first World Cup knockout win since 1986, the city government said. City Mayor Clara Brugada expressed her most sincere condolences to the victims' family and pledged support in the coming days. Health authorities said emergency services treated 3 unconscious people at different locations around Paseo de la Reforma before transporting them to the hospital. After performing first aid and CPR techniques on the patients, they were transferred to a hospital for specialized medical care, the city's health authority said. All 3 were confirmed to have died from suffocation and identified by their families, it added. Tuesday's win sends Mexico into the World Cup's round of 16, where they could face England if Thomas Tuchel's side beat DR Congo on Wednesday.
Moving on to the world international news. A Ghanaian tailor has been shot dead in his shop in Cape Town, South Africa, during violent protests targeting foreign nationals, the Ghana High Commissioner in South Africa has confirmed. The victim, who is said to have lived and worked in South Africa for about 20 years, was reportedly inside his shop when he was shot on Tuesday, June 30th, 2026, as demonstrations linked to a nationwide anti-immigration campaign turned violent in parts of the country. He is survived by 3 children, with the eldest reportedly 10 years old. The Ghana High Commissioner says arrangements are currently underway to repatriate the body to Ghana to enable burial and other necessary family rights. The incident forms part of a wider wave of unrest tied to growing anti-immigration sentiment and protests in South Africa, which have in some instances escalated into violence against foreign nationals and their businesses. 2 days demonstrations were organized around a self-declared 30th June deadline set by the civic group March and March, led by Jacinta Nogbeze Zuma, first announced in December 2025 as notice for undocumented foreigners to leave South Africa. The group's demonstration spread nationwide through 2026 and have been linked to xenophobic and violent actions against foreigners. More than 20 civic groups took part in protests across all 9 provinces on the day, with marches through Johannesburg CBD, in which several people suspected by protesters of being foreign nationals were confronted by crowds, though a small group was shielded from assault and escorted to safety by bystanders. Authorities in South Africa have not yet released full details on the circumstances surrounding the shooting or confirmed any arrests in connection with the incident. The Ghanaian mission has assured that it's engaging relevant authorities to ensure full investigation into the killing and to support the bereaved family during the repatriation process.
We've come to the end of our news. The headlines once again. Sahel extremist groups pushing south towards Ghana. CDS warns of growing security threat.
Gamanche calls for collective action, stricter enforcement to address reoccurring flooding in Accra.
Floods require collective responsibility to address. NLA balls.
UWR, police arrest 3 suspects for possession of 50,000 ammunition.
Esiedun Ketia calls for overhaul of global economic order, says Africa's sovereignty remains incomplete.
NCCE dismisses reports of 14 million Ghana cedis budget freeze, insists civic education activities continue.
World Bank says Finance Ministry fiscal controls delay great projects. Inflation for June 2026 rises sharply to 5.3%, rising non-food prices main contributor. 3 die in Mexico City World Cup celebration. 1 Ghanaian shot dead during mass xenophobic protests in South Africa. You've been listening to Radio Lynk 97.5 News, live from our studio, Kumasi Technical University. My name is Yasewa. The other morning activities continue. Good morning. Good morning.